Ridgeview High School stood as a monument to change in Oakridge County. What had once been a modest school serving farm families had transformed over 2 decades into an impressive campus with state-of-the-art facilities, funded largely by the influx of wealthy professionals who had discovered the charm of rural living with suburban convenience. The original brick buildings had been supplemented with gleaming additions housing specialized labs, a performing arts center, and technology suites that rivaled small colleges. The farming families who had populated the region for generations now found themselves increasingly outnumbered at school events by parents who arrived in luxury vehicles and discussed summer homes and private college consultants. Teachers like Dr. Eleanor Thompson had been recruited specifically to elevate the school's academic profile and appeal to these new families. Dr. Thompson's advanced engineering and environmental science course was considered the crown jewel of Ridgeview's STEM program. At 45, with a doctorate from Stanford and 8 years at a prestigious research institute in San Francisco, she had reluctantly returned to her home state when her mother fell ill. She considered teaching high school students a significant step down from her previous work, but had determined to make the best of it by creating a program that would send students to elite universities. Her classroom reflected her philosophy. Pristine workstations with the latest equipment, walls adorned with framed scientific journal covers featuring her research, and a glass display case showcasing student projects that had won state and national recognition. A sign above her desk announced in elegant typography, "Innovation requires excellence in execution." Dr. Thompson's appearance matched her classroom's precise aesthetic. Her designer glasses perched on her nose as she moved through the lab. On a bright April morning, her tailored blazer and perfectly styled hair giving her the look of a corporate executive rather than a teacher. The sound of her heels clicking against the polished floor commanded attention without her saying a word. "Today, we continue preparations for the regional science fair," she announced to her class of juniors and seniors. "Remember that your projects represent not just yourselves, but Ridgeview's growing reputation for excellence. The judges will be looking for sophistication in both concept and presentation." The students, mostly from the newer families in Oakridge, listened attentively. Many had chosen this elective specifically because Dr. Thompson's recommendation letters carried significant weight with admissions officers at prestigious universities. She was known for favoring students whose projects demonstrated access to advanced materials and professional-level equipment. The classroom door opened, and Principal Chen entered with a student Jackson had never seen before. Jackson Miller stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding what appeared to be a collection of PVC pipes, repurposed metal parts, and a control unit housed in a weatherproofed plastic container. His worn work boots and faded jeans contrasted sharply with the other students' more polished appearances. "Dr. Thompson, this is Jackson Miller. He's joining your class mid-semester due to a scheduling change," Principal Chen explained. His previous science project scored impressively at Carlton High before his family moved here last month. I believe he can catch up quickly. Jackson, 17, with earnest blue eyes and sun-browned skin that spoke of outdoor work, shifted uncomfortably under Dr. Thompson's appraising gaze, which had immediately registered his clothes and the humble appearance of his project materials. "How unexpected," Dr. Thompson replied, her tone making the word sound like anything but a welcome. "Jackson, you can take the empty workstation in the back. We're in final preparation for the regional science fair next week." Principal Chen nodded encouragingly to Jackson before departing, leaving the boy to make his way to the indicated station as 24 pairs of eyes tracked his movement. His worn backpack and the collection of what looked like salvage parts drew subtle smirks from several students. "As I was saying," Dr. Thompson continued, "innovation requires excellence in execution. The difference between a high school project and true engineering lies in precision, professionalism, and presentation. She gestured toward the display case containing previous winning projects, all featuring sleek designs with custom manufactured components. Jackson quietly set up his project at the workstation, seemingly oblivious to the sideways glances. He carefully connected several components and checked a small digital display that flickered to life despite its scratched screen. During the work period, Dr. Thompson moved from station to station, offering guidance and praise. She spent considerable time with Bradley Winters, whose father was the CEO of a regional banking group and a major donor to the school. Despite the somewhat derivative nature of his solar collection array, she offered effusive compliments on its professional-grade implementation. When she finally reached Jackson's station, her expression shifted to one of barely disguised disdain. The contraption before her consisted of PVC pipes of varying diameters, a small pump that appeared to have been salvaged from another device, and a control unit housed in what looked like a repurposed tackle box. A series of moisture sensors, made from galvanized nails, copper wire, and what might have been parts from an old circuit board, were arranged in a demonstration soil bed. "And what exactly are we looking at here?" Dr. Thompson asked, loud enough for nearby students to hear. Jackson looked up, his expression brightening with the opportunity to explain. "It's an adaptive irrigation system for small-scale farming," he said. "It uses moisture sensors to deliver precise amounts of water only where and when it's needed, cutting water usage by about 60% compared to traditional methods." "I see," Dr. Thompson replied with a thin smile. "Very rustic, though I'm not sure repurposed plumbing has much place in a serious engineering competition." Several students snickered behind their hands. Jackson continued undeterred. "The system calculates soil conditions and weather patterns using this reprogrammed weather station." He pointed to what appeared to be a modified device with additional sensors. "It can anticipate watering needs 48 hours in advance with 93% accuracy based on the testing I've done on our farm." Dr. Thompson lifted one of the moisture sensors with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. "And these are made from roofing nails." "Galvanized steel with copper wiring," Jackson explained. "The specific metals create a galvanic reaction that changes with moisture levels. It's actually based on principles the military uses for field monitoring systems. My dad helped me understand the concept." For a moment, Dr. Thompson seemed taken aback by the technical explanation, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I suppose there's a certain creativity in using scrap materials. However, Bradley's project over here utilizes properly manufactured components with certified precision." She gestured toward Bradley's station, where an array of clearly store-bought solar panels were arranged in a conventional pattern. "The difference," she continued, addressing the nearby students who had stopped to watch, "between amateur tinkering and actual engineering is professional implementation. Remember that judges respond to projects that demonstrate proper scientific methodology and professional-grade execution." The comment elicited knowing smiles from several students. Jackson's face remained composed, but his shoulders tensed slightly as he carefully adjusted a connection on his device. As the class period neared its end, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thompson addressed the students once more. The regional science fair judges include representatives from Palmer Tech and Westridge Engineering. These companies offer summer internships to exceptional participants, which can significantly impact your college applications. I expect everyone to present themselves and their work appropriately." Her gaze lingered on Jackson. Those who cannot manage a professional-grade presentation might want to reconsider their participation rather than to embarrass themselves or the school. Students began gathering their materials as the bell approached. Jackson carefully packed his project components into a repurposed military surplus bag, securing each piece with practiced care. Dr. Thompson approached as he was zipping the bag closed. "Mr. Miller, a word before you leave." Jackson looked up, his expression guarded but respectful. "That collection of pipes and salvaged electronics may have been acceptable at your previous school," she said, her voice lowered but still carrying to nearby students. "But Ridgeview has certain standards. That contraption isn't suitable for representation at the regional fair." Jackson stood straight, looking directly at her. "With respect, Dr. Thompson, the system is fully functional and addresses a real agricultural need. The materials are waterproof, durable, and designed for field conditions. They're not pretty, but they're practical." "This isn't about practicality," Dr. Thompson replied dismissively. "Engineering competitions at this level require professional presentation. Your brain farm project would be out of place among serious scientific work." The last few students lingered, pretending to pack up while eavesdropping on the exchange. "The components are repurposed intentionally," Jackson explained, his voice calm but firm. "Part of the design goal was affordability for small farms. The entire system costs less than $100 to implement compared to commercial systems that start at $2,000. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Thompson said with exaggerated patience, "perhaps you're missing the point. Science fairs aren't charity showcases for budget solutions. They recognize excellence in innovation, which includes professional execution." Jackson nodded once, his jaw tightening slightly. "I understand your position, Dr. Thompson, but I believe function matters more than appearance." "You're welcome to believe that," she replied with a thin smile. "But the judges won't. If you want to participate in the fair, I suggest you either significantly upgrade your materials or develop a new project entirely. That collection of salvage has no place in a prestigious competition." With that, she turned and walked back to her desk, leaving Jackson standing beside his packed project. Bradley and two other students exchanged smirks as they passed him on their way out. As Jackson left the classroom, Olivia Martinez fell into step beside him in the hallway. "Don't let Thompson get to you," she said quietly. "She does this to anyone who doesn't fit her image of what a proper student should be." "Thanks," Jackson replied, managing a small smile. "It's not the first time someone's judged my work by how it looks instead of how it works." "Your irrigation system actually sounds amazing," Olivia continued. "My grandparents have a small farm outside town, and water management is their biggest challenge." Jackson's expression brightened. "If they'd like to see it in action, I've implemented it on sections of our farm. It's cut our water usage almost in half this season." As they reached the school exit, Jackson noticed his mother waiting in their modest sedan. "Thanks for the encouragement, Olivia. I appreciate it. What are you going to do about the science fair?" she asked. Jackson looked thoughtful for a moment. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm not scrapping a working system just because it doesn't look fancy enough." He glanced toward his mother's car. "I should go. See you tomorrow." Maria Miller noticed her son's subdued demeanor immediately as he approached the car. Usually animated when discussing his classes, Jackson was uncharacteristically quiet as he placed his project bag carefully in the back seat. "Tough day?" she asked as he settled into the passenger seat. Jackson shrugged. "New school, new expectations. The advanced engineering teacher doesn't think my irrigation system is sophisticated enough for their science fair." "What?" Maria's brow furrowed as she pulled away from the curb. "But you've been testing and refining that system for months. It works beautifully on our south field." "Apparently working isn't enough," Jackson replied, looking out the window at the passing Suburban homes that gradually gave way to more rural landscapes. Dr. Thompson says it looks too homemade, doesn't have the right professional execution. Maria glanced at her son, recognizing the familiar set of his jaw that indicated he was processing frustration. What does your father always say about field engineering? A small smile tugged at Jackson's lips. Function over form. If it works in the field, it's good engineering. Exactly, Maria nodded. Your father's battalion doesn't use shiny equipment because it looks good in photographs. They use what works when lives depend on it. They drove in companionable silence for several minutes before Jackson spoke again. Is Dad going to make it back for the science fair next week? That's actually why I picked you up today, Maria replied, her expression brightening. He called this morning. His battalion finished the bridge construction in Colorado ahead of schedule. They're convoying back to Fort Carson on Monday and should be home by Tuesday evening. That's great! Jackson's mood visibly lifted. The science fair is Wednesday. Maybe he can help me explain the military applications that inspired some of the design. Maria smiled at her son's renewed enthusiasm. I think he'd like that. You know how proud he is of your engineering mind. As they turned onto the long, gravel driveway leading to their farmhouse, Jackson made a decision. I'm entering the fair with my system exactly as it is, he said firmly. If it's good enough for actual farmers and good enough for military applications, it should be good enough for a high school science fair. That's my boy, Maria said with quiet pride, standing behind your work. The Miller family farm came into view, a modest but well-maintained property that had been in the family for 3 generations. Unlike the larger commercial operations that dominated much of the region, their 60 acres focused on sustainable methods and specialized crops. The southern field, visible from the driveway, showed neat rows of early spring plantings, each section connected to Jackson's innovative irrigation system. What neither Jackson nor his mother noticed was Dr. Thompson driving slowly past their farm entrance, having followed at a distance to confirm her suspicions about the Miller family's circumstances. The sight of the modest farmhouse and aged barn reinforced her assessment that Jackson Miller didn't belong in her prestigious program, and his makeshift project had no place representing Ridgeview at the regional competition. She had no way of knowing that her judgments were about to be dramatically challenged. The weekend passed with Jackson making final adjustments to his irrigation system, testing and retesting the moisture sensors and calibrating the control unit to respond to different soil conditions. By Sunday evening, he had prepared a detailed presentation explaining both the technical aspects of his design and its practical applications for small-scale sustainable farming. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. Dr. Thompson arrived at Ridgeview earlier than usual, carrying her premium coffee and reviewing her notes for the final science fair preparations. The regional competition was just 2 days away, and she was determined that Ridgeview would continue its winning streak under her guidance. She wore one of her most expensive outfits, a tailored suit that communicated the professional image she believed essential to scientific credibility. Image was everything in academic circles after all, a lesson she consistently impressed upon her students. Assistant Principal Ramirez intercepted her in the hallway, looking somewhat concerned. Eleanor, there's an unusual situation this morning. I wanted to make you aware of. Dr. Thompson took a sip of her coffee, barely interested. Oh. We've received a notification that a military convoy will be making a brief stop at the school around noon. Apparently, they're on their way to Fort Carson and needed a large parking area for a scheduled maintenance check. Dr. Thompson frowned slightly. A military convoy here? That seems highly irregular. Surely there are more appropriate locations. The request came directly from the battalion commander, Ramirez continued, checking his tablet. The superintendent, Already approved it, since it's only for about an hour, and they've offered to give our JROTC students a tour of some of their engineering equipment. Well, I suppose there's educational value in that, Dr. Thompson conceded reluctantly, though I hope this won't disrupt our science fair preparations. Bradley Winters is expecting feedback on his final display layout this afternoon. It shouldn't interfere, Ramirez assured her. They'll be using the north parking lot, away from the main academic buildings. As the assistant principal walked away, Dr. Thompson dismissed the matter from her mind, focusing instead on her plans to showcase her program's achievements to the regional science fair judges. A military pit stop was hardly relevant to her concerns. The morning classes proceeded normally. In her advanced engineering period, Dr. Thompson reviewed final presentation requirements with her students, emphasizing the importance of professionalism in both appearance and delivery. "Remember," she said, pacing between the workstations, "the judges will form their first impression within seconds of approaching your display. Everything from the quality of your materials to your personal presentation communicates your seriousness." As a scientist, she paused near Jackson Station, where he was quietly assembling his display materials, sturdy cardboard presentation boards, rather than the glossy professional displays many other students had purchased. "Mr. Miller," she said loudly enough for others to hear, "I see you've decided to proceed with your original project." Jackson looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am. It's fully functional and meets all the scientific criteria in the competition guidelines." Dr. Thompson's lips thinned slightly. "Technical compliance is the bare minimum, not the standard for excellence. But I suppose each student must make their own choices." She moved on, leaving the implied criticism hanging in the air. As noon approached, a peculiar rumbling sound gradually became noticeable throughout the school. Students near windows began pointing outside, their attention drawn to the unusual sight approaching the campus. A convoy of 8 military vehicles was turning into the school's north entrance, 2 Humvees leading, followed by 4 large transport trucks, a mobile command unit, and a recovery vehicle bringing up the rear. Each was painted in standard military green with identification numbers clearly visible on their sides. Word spread quickly through the school about the military visitors. Students and several teachers made their way to windows overlooking the parking lot, where the vehicles were arranging themselves in a precise formation. Dr. Thompson glanced outside with mild curiosity, but continued her lesson until the bell rang for lunch period. As students filed out, many heading toward the north lot to get a closer look at the military vehicles, she gathered her materials for her planning period. Principal Chen appeared at her classroom door. "Dr. Thompson, could you join me for a few minutes? There's someone I'd like you to meet." "Of course," she replied, assuming it might be a potential donor or visiting educator. "Is this about the science fair preparations?" "In a way," Principal Chen said cryptically, "it concerns one of your students." Intrigued, Dr. Thompson followed him through the hallways toward the administrative offices. As they walked, she noticed an unusual number of students gathered at windows and doorways, watching something in the main entry area with great interest. When they turned the final corner into the administrative suite, Dr. Thompson stopped short. Standing in the office reception area was a commanding figure in full military dress uniform, adorned with numerous medals and insignia indicating senior rank. Beside him stood Jackson Miller, looking simultaneously proud and uncomfortable with the attention. "Dr. Thompson," Principal Chen said formally, "may I introduce Sergeant Major Robert Miller, commander of the 52nd Engineering Battalion. He's Jackson's father." The distinguished officer turned to face her, and Dr. Thompson was struck by the immediate resemblance to Jackson, the same direct blue eyes and composed expression. Sergeant Major Miller extended his hand with practiced precision. "Dr. Thompson, I've heard quite a bit about your engineering program from my son." Dr. Thompson automatically shook his hand, her mind racing to process this unexpected development. This was Jackson's father, the battalion commander, whose convoy was currently parked in their lot. "Sergeant Major Miller," she managed to respond. Professionally, "This is an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware of Jackson's family connections." "Jackson prefers to make his own way," the sergeant major replied, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "He mentioned you had some concerns about his science fair project that I might be able to address." Principal Chen's eyebrows raised slightly at this, his gaze shifting between the military commander and his science teacher. "Well," Dr. Thompson said carefully, "I expressed some professional observations about presentation standards for the regional competition. All students benefit from constructive feedback." "Indeed," Sergeant Major Miller nodded. "Feedback is essential for improvement. Jackson mentioned you had concerns specifically about the materials used in his irrigation system, describing them as rustic and salvage, I believe." Dr. Thompson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I simply pointed out that professional-grade components tend to make a better impression on judges than repurposed materials." "That's an interesting perspective," the sergeant major said thoughtfully, "especially given that Jackson's design is based directly on water conservation systems my battalion developed for agricultural restoration in drought-affected regions overseas." Principal Chen looked at Jackson with new interest. "Is that so?" Jackson nodded. "Yes, sir. Dad explained how they created emergency irrigation for farming communities in Afghanistan using locally available materials. I adapted the concept for small-scale farming here. In fact," Sergeant Major Miller continued, "those salvaged parts represent a significant innovation. When you're deploying systems in remote locations, you need solutions that can be maintained with locally available materials and limited technical knowledge. Jackson's system addresses both challenges while improving efficiency." Dr. Thompson found herself on unfamiliar ground, her usual confidence wavering. While that's certainly admirable for field applications, the science fair tends to prioritize more sophisticated approaches. "Dr. Thompson," Principal Chen interjected, "did you know that Jackson's previous school nominated his irrigation system for a state sustainability award?" Before she could respond, Sergeant Major Miller pulled out his phone. "With your permission, I'd like to show you something." He opened a series of photographs showing a military engineering team installing what was unmistakably a more robust version of Jackson's irrigation system in an arid landscape. Local farmers were visible in the images, being trained on maintaining the equipment. This deployment reduced water consumption by 58%, while increasing crop yields by nearly 30% across 3 growing seasons, the Sergeant Major explained. The Department of Defense has since implemented similar systems in 4 countries as part of agricultural stability operations. Dr. Thompson stared at the images, her academic mind registering the implications even as her pride struggled to adjust. "I had no idea Jackson's design had such significant applications. Few innovations that change lives begin as polished products," Sergeant Major Miller observed. "Function over form is the first rule of field engineering. The second is sustainability. If locals can't maintain it after we leave, we've failed no matter how impressive it looks." Principal Chen seized the educational opportunity. "Sergeant Major Miller, would you be willing to share some of this context with our students? Perhaps a short presentation in conjunction with the science fair preparations?" "That's actually why I'm here," the military officer replied. "My battalion is convoying back to Fort Carson, and I arranged our maintenance stop here specifically to support Jackson's project. We have the deployed version of his irrigation system on one of our transport vehicles as part of our agricultural assistance equipment. He turned to Dr. Thompson directly. With your permission, of course. I wouldn't want to interfere with your classroom objectives. Put on the spot, Dr. Thompson quickly recalibrated her approach. That would be most educational for the students. A real-world application of engineering principles. Excellent, Principal Chen said, clearly pleased with this development. Perhaps we could gather the science fair participants during fifth period. The gymnasium would provide adequate space. As arrangements were made, Dr. Thompson found herself re-evaluating everything she had assumed about Jackson Miller and his rustic project. The boy she had dismissed as a simple farm kid with a makeshift contraption had actually created a scaled version of military technology with international humanitarian applications. By fifth period, word had spread throughout Ridgeview about the military convoy and its connection to Jackson Miller. Students gathered in the gymnasium where members of Sergeant Major Miller's battalion had set up a demonstration of their agricultural assistance equipment, including the irrigation system that so closely resembled Jackson's science fair project. Dr. Thompson watched from the side as Sergeant Major Miller addressed the assembled students, explaining how seemingly simple solutions often had the most significant impact in challenging environments. His engineers demonstrated how the system worked, pointing out design elements that Jackson had adapted for his version. The most valuable engineering isn't always the most expensive or the most visually impressive, the Sergeant Major told the students. It's the solution that works reliably where it's needed most, with materials that are actually available to the people who depend on it. Several students who had previously smirked at Jackson's project now approached him with questions, their perspective visibly shifted by the military validation of his work. Even Bradley Winters, after initial reluctance, asked about the moisture sensor design. After the presentation, Dr. Thompson found herself face to face with Jackson and his father in a quiet corner of the gymnasium. "Mr. Miller," she began, addressing Jackson directly, "I believe I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your project based on its appearance, rather than fully understanding its function and significance." Jackson seemed momentarily surprised by the admission. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I understand how it might have looked compared to the other projects." "That's precisely the problem," she acknowledged. "I was judging based on appearance rather than substance, a significant oversight for someone who teaches science." Sergeant Major Miller observed this exchange with quiet approval. "The mark of a good leader, Dr. Thompson, is the ability to reassess when presented with new information, something I try to instill in my engineers and my son." Dr. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "A valuable lesson for our students as well." She turned back to Jackson. "I believe your irrigation system deserves a proper explanation at the regional fair. If you'd like any assistance preparing your presentation to emphasize its practical applications and design principles, I'd be happy to provide it." The unexpected offer of help caught Jackson off guard. "I'd appreciate that very much, Dr. Thompson." "Thank you." As they walked back toward the main building, Sergeant Major Miller fell into step beside Dr. Thompson, while Jackson moved ahead to speak with some classmates who were now regarding him with newfound respect. "You know," the military officer said quietly, Jackson was concerned about transferring to Ridgeview. At his previous school, he'd found a mentor who understood the value of practical innovation. He worried that a more prestigious school might focus too much on appearances. Dr. Thompson felt a twinge of discomfort, recognizing the accuracy of his concern. "I'm afraid I initially confirmed those fears." "Perhaps," Miller acknowledged, "but what matters is where we go from here. The ability to admit an error and change course, that's something worth modeling for these students." His words stayed with Dr. Thompson as she watched Jackson interact with his peers, noticing how his quiet confidence had remained intact despite her dismissal of his work. There was a lesson in that too, believing in your own creation even when others couldn't see its value. That evening, Dr. Thompson sat at her kitchen table long after dinner had been cleared away, reviewing Jackson's project documentation with new eyes. The clever adaptations of basic scientific principles, the elegant simplicity of the control system, the careful consideration of real-world maintenance needs, all of it spoke to an engineering mind far more sophisticated than she had initially credited. By comparison, Bradley Winter's solar collection array, which she had praised so effusively, now seemed derivative and uninspired despite its professional components. It followed established patterns without introducing any meaningful innovation. How had she missed this distinction? The answer was uncomfortable but clear. She had been evaluating based on packaging rather than content, on presentation rather than innovation. For someone who prided herself on scientific rigor, it was a humbling realization. The following morning, Dr. Thompson arrived at school carrying not just her usual premium coffee, but a folder of suggestions for Jackson's presentation. Ways to emphasize the system's innovative aspects without compromising its authentic character. She had stayed up well past midnight researching similar applications of low-cost irrigation technology in developing regions, finding that Jackson's approach compared favorably with systems designed by professional engineers with far greater resources. When Jackson arrived at her classroom during lunch period, as they had arranged, she spread the materials on her desk. "I've been thinking about how to frame your presentation," she began. "The key is to help the judges understand that the repurposed materials aren't a limitation but a deliberate design choice with significant advantages." Jackson looked through her notes with increasing interest. "This is exactly what I was trying to explain. The system has to be repairable with locally available parts, or it becomes useless the first time something breaks." "Precisely," Dr. Thompson nodded, "and that constraint actually drove innovation rather than limiting it. That's a compelling narrative for the judges, how working within real-world constraints led to creative solutions." They spent the lunch period refining his presentation approach, with Dr. Thompson offering suggestions on how to emphasize the technical sophistication behind the humble appearance. She found herself genuinely impressed by Jackson's clear understanding of the scientific principles underlying his creation. "You know," she said as their time was ending, "I've been teaching advanced engineering for 7 years, and I've seen many technically proficient students. But true innovation, designing something that solves real problems in new ways, that's much rarer. You have a gift for practical innovation that can't be taught from textbooks." The sincere compliment brought a flush of pride to Jackson's face. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson. That means a lot coming from you." As he gathered his materials to leave, Dr. Thompson added, "Oh, and Jackson, I've arranged for your irrigation system to be featured at the center of our school's science fair display, not tucked away in the sustainability corner as I'd originally planned." The afternoon class had a different atmosphere than previous sessions. Dr. Thompson began by acknowledging Sergeant Major Miller's presentation and connecting it to their upcoming competition. "Yesterday, we were fortunate to see how engineering principles apply in real-world contexts," she told the students. "I want to emphasize a point that Sergeant Major Miller made about function over form. While presentation matters in communication, true engineering excellence lies in how effectively a design solves the problem it addresses." She moved to Jackson's workstation. "Mr. Miller's irrigation system exemplifies this principle. Its appearance is determined by its function, to provide affordable, maintainable water conservation for small-scale farming. The repurposed materials aren't a weakness, but a deliberate feature that makes the system accessible to its intended users. Bradley Winters shifted uncomfortably at his station, unused to seeing another student's work highlighted over his own. "For tomorrow's science fair," Dr. Thompson continued, "I want each of you to prepare a specific explanation of how your project's design choices relate to its intended function and users. Remember that innovation isn't measured by how impressive something looks, but by how effectively it solves a problem in a new or improved way." The shift in emphasis was subtle but significant. Several students who had previously been concerned about the appearance of their projects now refocused on articulating their functional innovations. Even Bradley could be seen reconsidering aspects of his presentation, adding notes about efficiency, improvements, rather than just highlighting the professional components. After class, Olivia Martinez approached Dr. Thompson's desk while other students were filing out. "Dr. Thompson, I was wondering if I could make some adjustments to my project." "What kind of adjustments?" Dr. Thompson asked. "Well, after seeing Jackson's irrigation system and hearing about designing for accessibility, I realized my water quality monitoring system is too complicated for most people to use. I'd like to simplify the interface and make it more intuitive, even if that makes it look less sophisticated." Dr. Thompson smiled, recognizing the seed of genuine engineering thinking. "That sounds like an excellent improvement, Olivia. Function over form." As Wednesday morning arrived, the day of the regional science fair, Dr. Thompson found herself genuinely excited about the diverse projects her students would be presenting. Where previously she had focused primarily on which projects would bring prestige to Ridgeview, she now found herself appreciating the range of innovative approaches her students had developed. The school's science fair team gathered in the gymnasium for final preparations before boarding the buses to the regional competition center. Jackson stood beside his irrigation system, now mounted on a simple but effective display that emphasized its functional components, while educational diagrams explained the science behind each element. Sergeant Major Miller had arrived in his dress uniform, planning to attend the fair as a parent supporter. He nodded respectfully to Dr. Thompson as she approached. "Your son's presentation looks excellent," she told him. "The judges will understand both the science and the practical application." "He worked late into the night on those explanatory diagrams," Miller replied. "Said you suggested focusing on the innovative sensor design rather than apologizing for the materials." "It was the right approach," Dr. Thompson agreed. "His innovation deserves to be recognized on its merits." As the students began loading their projects for transport, Principal Chen joined them, looking pleased with the display. "Quite a transformation in just a few days," he observed quietly to Dr. Thompson. "Both in the project presentation and, if I may say, in your approach to it." Dr. Thompson acknowledged this with a nod. "Let's just say I've been reminded of what true engineering excellence looks like. It's not always wrapped in the most polished package." The regional science fair was held in the convention center of a nearby city, with hundreds of projects from dozens of schools arranged in a sprawling display of student innovation. The Ridgeview team was assigned a prominent area near the center of the hall, reflecting the school's strong reputation in previous competitions. As Dr. Thompson helped her students set up their displays, she noticed a distinct difference in how they presented themselves compared to previous years. Rather than focusing on appearance and prestige, they were genuinely eager to explain the functional aspects of their designs and the problems they solved. When the judges began their rounds, Dr. Thompson stood back, allowing her students to present their work independently. She watched with quiet pride as Jackson confidently explained his irrigation system to a panel of 3 judges, including representatives from Palmer Tech and the State University's Agricultural Engineering Department. Instead of being dismissive of the repurposed materials as she had feared, the judges were visibly impressed by the system's elegant functionality and real-world application. The Palmer Tech representative spent nearly 20 minutes asking detailed questions about the moisture sensors and control algorithms, clearly recognizing the sophistication behind the simple appearance. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we're looking for," he commented loud enough for Dr. Thompson to overhear. "Solutions that work in the real world, not just in laboratories." As the judges moved to Bradley Station with its professionally manufactured solar array, Dr. Thompson noticed their evaluation was respectful but briefer. "Impressive looking, but the approach is fairly standard," one commented to another. "Nothing we haven't seen before." Throughout the day, she observed similar patterns across all her students' presentations. The projects that demonstrated practical innovation with clear real-world applications received the most engaged attention from judges, regardless of their physical appearance or material cost. By late afternoon, as the judges retired to deliberate on their selections, Dr. Thompson gathered her students in a quiet corner of the convention center. "Whatever the results today," she told them, "I want you to know how proud I am of the work you've presented. You've demonstrated not just technical knowledge, but true engineering thinking, creating solutions that address real needs effectively and accessibly." She glanced at Jackson, who stood quietly at the edge of the group. "And we've all learned an important lesson about not judging innovation by its cover. Sometimes the most transformative ideas come in the most unassuming packages." When the award ceremony began at 5 o'clock, the Ridgeview team sat together in a section near the front, with parents and supporters behind them. Sergeant Major Miller sat ramrod straight in his dress uniform, his presence drawing respectful glances from those nearby. The Sustainability Category awards were announced first. When Jackson Miller's name was called for first place, his classmates erupted in genuine applause. Dr. Thompson felt an unexpected surge of emotion as she watched him walk to the stage. To receive his medal and certificate, the judge presenting the award, Dr. Harriet Santiago from Palmer Tech, made a point of commenting on the project's significance. "This year's top sustainability project demonstrates exceptional innovation in addressing water conservation with accessible, maintainable technology. It's a reminder that solving global challenges often requires solutions that work not just in ideal conditions, but in the real world with real constraints." As more awards were announced, Ridgeview students continued to receive recognition across multiple categories, more diverse recognition than in previous years, when they had dominated only the technology and presentation-focused categories. The final announcement was for the Overall Innovation Award, which included a summer internship at Palmer Tech's Agricultural Engineering Division. When Jackson's name was called again, Dr. Thompson found herself on her feet, applauding along with his classmates and father. The judges specifically cited the ingenious use of accessible materials to solve real-world problems in their decision, the announcer explained. A reminder that true innovation often comes from reimagining what's possible with the resources at hand. Bradley Winters received an honorable mention for technical execution, but not the top placement Dr. Thompson had expected based on the project's professional appearance. It was a tangible confirmation of the shift in values she had been experiencing: function over form, innovation over presentation. As students and parents celebrated after the award ceremony, Dr. Thompson found herself approached by the lead judge, Dr. Santiago from Palmer Tech. "That Miller boy has remarkable potential," Dr. Santiago commented. "His approach to problem solving is exactly what we need more of in the field. Too many young engineers focus on making things look impressive rather than work effectively. I've come to recognize that myself. Dr. Thompson admitted. I initially underestimated the significance of his work because of its appearance. Dr. Santiago nodded knowingly. It's a common blind spot, especially in academic settings. We get caught up in polished presentations and forget that real engineering often looks messy in its development stages. She glanced over to where Jackson was showing his system to a group of interested students. I'll be watching his progress with great interest. As Dr. Thompson watched her students celebrating their various achievements, she reflected on the transformation that had occurred in just 1 week, not just in how she evaluated their work, but in how they approached it themselves. The competitive hierarchy that had previously dominated her classroom had given way to a more collaborative atmosphere where diverse approaches were valued for their unique contributions. Jackson stood at the center of a small group, patiently, explaining his moisture sensor design to students from other schools. There was no trace of the vindication or triumph one might expect from someone whose work had been initially dismissed, then dramatically validated. Instead, he exhibited the same quiet confidence and genuine interest in sharing knowledge that had characterized him from the beginning. In that moment, Dr. Thompson realized he had been the true teacher this week, demonstrating not just engineering principles, but the more valuable lesson of believing in your work's value even when others cannot yet see it. The bus ride back to Ridgeview was filled with excited chatter from students celebrating their various awards and recognitions. Dr. Thompson noticed how different the dynamic was from previous competitions. Instead of Bradley and his circle dominating the conversation, there was a more inclusive atmosphere, with students from diverse backgrounds sharing their experiences and insights. Jackson sat quietly near the back of the bus, looking tired but satisfied. Dr. Thompson made her way to the empty seat beside him. Congratulations again, Mr. Miller. Your success was well-deserved. Thank you, he replied, genuine appreciation in his voice. And thank you for helping me refine my presentation. It made a big difference in explaining the system's applications. I simply helped you articulate what was already there, she said. The innovation was entirely yours. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I hope you know that I genuinely regret my initial assessment of your work. Jackson looked at her directly. My dad says good scientists and good soldiers have something in common. They're willing to change their understanding when the evidence changes. That's what you did. His simple acceptance of her apology, without resentment or triumph, impressed Dr. Thompson more than any polished presentation could have. It spoke to a maturity that transcended age or academic credentials. Your father is a wise man, she acknowledged, and you've clearly learned well from him. As the bus pulled into the Ridgeview parking lot, Dr. Thompson made a decision that would ultimately transform not just her teaching, but the entire engineering program at the school. As arrangements were made for Sergeant Major Miller's presentation to the students, Jackson slipped away from the administrative office, needing a moment to process the unexpected turn of events. He hadn't intended for his father to stage such a dramatic intervention when he'd called home last night. Frustrated after Dr. Thompson's dismissal of his project, he'd simply been venting. He never imagined his dad would reroute an entire military convoy to make a point. Jackson found a quiet corner in the library, his mind racing. Part of him felt vindicated that his irrigation system was finally being recognized for its practical value rather than judged on its appearance. But another part worried that his father's intervention might overshadow the actual merits of his work. Would his classmates now see his project as worthy because of its military connection rather than its innovative design? Would Dr. Thompson's changed perspective be genuine or merely a response to his father's rank? His thoughts were interrupted by Olivia Martinez, who slid into the chair across from him. So, she said quietly, eyes wide. Your dad commands a military engineering battalion, and your irrigation system is being used in international humanitarian operations. Were you ever planning to mention that? Jackson shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. It didn't seem relevant. The system should stand on its own merits, not who my family is or where else it's being used. Olivia studied him for a moment. That's actually really admirable, Jackson. Most people would have name-dropped their famous military commander father within 5 minutes of meeting someone. My dad always says true engineering doesn't need credentials to prove its worth, Jackson replied. If something works, it works, regardless of who designed it or what letters they have after their name. Well, your dad's Convoy is causing quite a stir, Olivia informed him. Bradley Winters looks like he's swallowed something sour. Half the faculty is gathered at windows watching the military vehicles, and Dr. Thompson is... She trailed off, searching for the right words. Reconsidering her evaluation criteria? Jackson suggested with a hint of a smile. Let's just say her expression suggests she's doing some rapid internal recalculations, Olivia replied. The rumor spreading through school is that she dismissed a project that the military considers important enough to transport in a special convoy. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling the weight of expectations. This wasn't what I wanted. I just needed her to judge my work fairly, not because my dad showed up with military backup. Maybe it's not ideal, Olivia acknowledged. But sometimes people need a dramatic wake-up call before they can see past their preconceptions. Their conversation was cut short by an announcement over the school intercom system. All science. Their participants were to report to the gymnasium during 5th period for a special presentation on real-world engineering applications. When Jackson arrived at the gymnasium later that day, he was struck by the transformation. Members of his father's engineering battalion had set up several demonstration stations showcasing practical applications of various technologies, including an expanded version of the irrigation system Jackson had adapted for their farm. Students filed in, with expressions ranging from curiosity to excitement. Bradley Winters and his usual group entered last, their usual confident demeanor somewhat subdued as they took in the impressive military presence. Principal Chen introduced Sergeant Major Miller, who stepped forward in his crisp uniform. The gymnasium fell silent as he began to speak, his authoritative voice carrying effortlessly through the large space. Engineering in the field isn't like engineering in a laboratory, he began. When you're deploying solutions in remote areas with limited resources, the priorities shift dramatically. Fancy materials and polished appearances mean nothing if a system fails because it can't be maintained or repaired with locally available parts. He gestured to the irrigation system display. This design was initially developed by our battalion's engineering team for agricultural restoration in drought-affected regions of Afghanistan. The key innovation wasn't in creating something that looked sophisticated. It was in creating something that worked reliably with materials that local farmers could obtain and maintain themselves. As his father continued explaining the principles behind field engineering, Jackson noticed Dr. Thompson standing near the back of the gymnasium, her expression thoughtful as she listened. She no longer projected the dismissive confidence she had shown in the classroom, instead appearing genuinely engaged with the technical aspects being presented. After the formal presentation, students broke into groups to examine the various stations. Jackson found himself surrounded by classmates who now viewed his project with new interest, asking questions about the moisture sensors and control systems that they had previously ignored. Even Bradley approached, though his manner remained stiff. So the military actually uses this kind of setup, he asked, gesturing toward the irrigation display. Modified versions, Jackson explained. The principle is the same, using galvanic reactions between different metals to create simple but reliable moisture sensors that don't require complex electronics to function. Bradley nodded slowly. I never considered that sophisticated might actually mean able to be repaired without specialized equipment. Different design priorities for different contexts, Jackson replied with a shrug. Your solar array would be perfect for environments where precision manufacturing is available. My system works better where people need to maintain it using whatever they can find locally. As the demonstration session continued, Jackson noticed Dr. Thompson making her way toward him, her expression unreadable. He excused himself from his classmates and met her halfway. Mr. Miller, she began, her tone more measured than he had heard before. Your father's presentation has been quite illuminating. Jackson nodded, unsure how to respond. I owe you an apology, she continued, surprising him. I made assumptions about your project based on its appearance rather than evaluating its functionality and purpose. That was inconsistent with the scientific principles I claim to value. Dim. The admission clearly didn't come easily to her, and Jackson appreciated the courage it took to acknowledge her error. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I understand how it might have looked compared to the other projects with their manufactured components. That's precisely the problem, she said. I allowed surface impressions to override substantive evaluation, a significant oversight for someone teaching scientific methodology. She paused, glancing toward the irrigation display where several students were engaged in conversation with one of the battalion engineers. Your design demonstrates considerable innovation in addressing real constraints, exactly the kind of problem-solving engineering should cultivate. Jackson felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. That means a lot coming from you. Dr. Thompson's expression shifted to one of professional interest. I'd like to better understand the control algorithm you developed for the water distribution. If you're willing, perhaps we could review your documentation before the regional fair. Your system deserves a proper technical explanation that highlights its innovative aspects. Before Jackson could respond, his father approached, having concluded the formal portion of the presentation. Dr. Thompson, Sergeant Major Miller acknowledged with a nod. I trust the demonstration has provided some useful context for Jackson's project. Indeed, she replied, though I find myself wondering why this context wasn't provided earlier. Jackson tensed, hearing the implied question. Why hadn't he simply explained his project's military connection from the beginning? His father smiled slightly. My son prefers to let his work speak for itself, without relying on family connections or external validation. A principle I've always respected, even when it makes things more challenging for him. Dr. Thompson considered this, then nodded slowly. A commendable approach, if sometimes impractical in a world that often judges based on credentials rather than merit. She turned back to Jackson. Nevertheless, your project has genuine technical value that deserves recognition. I'd be pleased to help you prepare a presentation that emphasizes those aspects for the regional competition. The conversation was interrupted as Principal Chen approached to thank Sergeant Major Miller for the educational demonstration. As they spoke, Dr. Thompson excused herself to assist students at one of the other stations, leaving Jackson alone with his father for a moment. Was this really necessary, Dad? Jackson asked quietly, gesturing toward the military vehicles visible through the gymnasium windows. His father's expression softened slightly. Sometimes, son, the most effective way to challenge someone's perspective is to present evidence they can't easily dismiss. Your Dr. Thompson seems like the type who respects authority and credentials. I simply provided those in a format she couldn't ignore. Jackson shook his head, though there was a hint of a smile on his face. A bit dramatic, don't you think? I prefer to think of it as a tactical demonstration, his father replied with a wink. Besides, we were genuinely heading back to Fort Carson. This was just a small detour in service of educational enlightenment. As the demonstration session wound down and students began returning to their regular classes, Jackson found himself approached by several JROTC students who had been particularly impressed by the military engineering applications. "Miller, you never said your dad was Sergeant Major Miller of the 52nd, one of them said, his tone almost accusatory. "My brother served under him in Afghanistan. Says he's the best engineering commander in the Army." Jackson shrugged, uncomfortable. "With the attention, it's not something I generally bring up." "Well, you should have," another student insisted. "Would have saved you the grief with Thompson. No one messes with the projects of a battalion commander's kid." "That's exactly why I don't mention it," Jackson replied firmly. "I want my work judged on its merits, not my family connections." The student looked perplexed, as if the concept of voluntarily foregoing an advantage was completely foreign to him. Before he could respond, Olivia appeared at Jackson's side. "Jackson, could you help me understand something about the moisture sensor design? I'm thinking of adapting a similar approach for my water quality project." Grateful for the rescue, Jackson excused himself and followed Olivia to a quieter corner of the gymnasium. "Thanks for the save," he said once they were out of earshot. "No problem," she replied, "though I actually do have questions about the sensors. But first, how are you holding up with all this?" She gestured toward the military presence and the students still buzzing about the revelation of Jackson's family connection. Jackson sighed. "It's not how I wanted things to play out. But I guess if it helps Dr. Thompson see the value in practical innovation over polished presentation, maybe some good will come of it." "She already seems different," Olivia observed, glancing toward where Dr. Thompson was engaged in serious conversation with one of the battalion engineers. "Less focused on appearances, more interested in functionality. That could benefit all of us." The remainder of the school day passed in a blur of curious glances and whispered conversations that fell silent whenever Jackson approached. By the time the final bell rang, he was exhausted from the constant attention and eager to escape the building. His mother was waiting in their modest sedan, a knowing smile on her face as he slid into the passenger seat. "So," she said, pulling away from the curb, "your father messaged me about his educational intervention today. Was it as dramatic as I imagine?" Jackson groaned. 8 military vehicles, Mom, a full convoy, and a demonstration set up in the gymnasium. Maria Miller laughed, a warm sound that helped ease some of the tension Jackson had been carrying. "That sounds like your father. Never uses a hammer when a bulldozer is available." "Dr. Thompson apologized, though," Jackson admitted, "and she offered to help me prepare for the regional fair, so I guess it worked." His mother's expression grew more serious. "Sometimes people need to be startled out of their assumptions, Jackson. Your father may have been theatrical about it, but his heart was in the right place. He couldn't bear the thought of your work being dismissed because someone couldn't see past its appearance." "I know," Jackson sighed, "but now I'm worried people will only value my project because of Dad's position, not because of the actual innovation." Maria was quiet for a moment as she navigated the familiar route home. "You know," she finally said, "when your father first proposed using galvanic reaction sensors for irrigation monitoring, his superior officers were skeptical. They wanted sophisticated electronic systems with digital readouts and computer interfaces. Robert had to fight to convince them that simpler, maintainable technology would be more effective in remote locations." "I didn't know that," Jackson said, surprised. "It took him setting up a demonstration where both systems were exposed to field conditions for 2 weeks with no maintenance. When the electronic sensors failed after a dust storm and his simple galvanic sensors kept working, they finally saw his point." She glanced at her son. Sometimes a demonstration is the most effective argument. As they turned onto the gravel driveway leading to their farm, Jackson noticed something that made him sit up straighter. "Mom, is that Bradley's car?" Parked near their barn was an expensive sports car that seemed entirely out of place in the rural setting. Leaning against it was Bradley Winters, looking uncomfortable in his designer clothes as he waited. "He asked for directions to our farm after school," Maria explained. "Said he wanted to see your irrigation system in actual operation. I told him he could meet us here." Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "Bradley Winters wants to see my farm project." "Apparently today's demonstration made quite an impression," she replied with a smile. "Perhaps seeing the military applications helped him understand what you've been trying to explain about practical innovation." As they pulled up beside the house, Bradley straightened, clearly anxious about being on unfamiliar territory. Jackson got out of the car, still processing this unexpected development. "Winters," he acknowledged. "My mum said you wanted to see the irrigation system?" Bradley nodded, his usual arrogance noticeably subdued. "If that's okay, after seeing the military version, I realized I didn't really understand the practical application in an actual agricultural setting." Jackson hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Sure, let me change into work clothes and I'll show you the Southfield setup." 20 minutes later, they stood at the edge of the newly planted section of the Miller farm, where rows of seedlings were thriving despite the minimal water usage. Jackson had changed into worn jeans and work boots, while Bradley looked increasingly out of place in his expensive loafers, now coated with a fine layer of farm dust. "The main control unit is here," Jackson explained, pointing to the weatherproof box mounted on a post. "It collects data from the moisture sensors embedded throughout the field and controls the water flow to different zones based on actual need rather than a preset schedule." Bradley examined the control unit with genuine interest. "And this can detect different soil conditions, not just moisture levels." "Right," Jackson confirmed. "The sensors measure electrical conductivity, which changes based on moisture, but is also affected by soil composition and temperature. The algorithm accounts for all those variables." For nearly an hour, Jackson walked Bradley through the system's operation, explaining the technical aspects without condescension. To his surprise, Bradley asked thoughtful questions that suggested he was truly trying to understand the engineering principles rather than just going through the motions. As they headed back toward the house, Bradley finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Look, Miller, I owe you an apology. I dismissed your project because it didn't look like what I thought serious engineering should be. After today, I realize that was narrow-minded." The admission clearly didn't come easily to someone accustomed to being at the top of the social and academic hierarchy. Jackson appreciated the effort it must have taken. "Thanks," he said simply. "Different approaches work for different contexts. Your solar array is technically excellent. It's just designed with different priorities in mind." Bradley nodded slowly. "That's what I've been thinking about. My project looks impressive, but it's not really innovative. It's just a well-executed version of established technology." He gestured toward the field. "This actually solves a real problem in a new way." They reached Bradley's car, which looked even more out of place after their tour of the working farm. Before getting in, Bradley turned back to Jackson with an unexpected question. "Do you think we could collaborate on something for the state competition next month? Your practical approach combined with my technical resources could make for an interesting project." Jackson was so surprised he didn't immediately respond. Bradley rushed to fill the silence. "It was just a thought. Your irrigation system got me thinking about applications for my solar collection that might actually help people who need it, not just impress judges. But if you're not interested..." "No," Jackson interrupted. "I think it's a good idea. I've actually been considering how to integrate renewable energy into the pumping system to make it fully self-sufficient." Bradley's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "That's exactly the kind of application I've been missing. I've been so focused on efficiency metrics that I overlooked practical implementation." As Bradley drove away, kicking up dust from the gravel driveway, Jackson found himself reflecting on the unexpected turns the day had taken. His father's dramatic intervention had not only changed Dr. Thompson's perspective, but had apparently catalyzed a shift in Bradley's thinking as well. When Jackson entered the kitchen, he found his mother preparing dinner while chatting with Olivia Martinez, who sat at the table with homework spread before her. "Olivia?" he asked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" She looked up with a smile. "Your mom invited me to see your irrigation system in action. I hope that's okay. I'm serious about adapting some of your sensor design for my water quality project." "Of course it's okay," he assured her, pulling out a chair. "I just wasn't expecting more visitors today." "Was that Bradley Winters I saw driving away?" Olivia asked, curiosity evident in her voice. "What did he want?" "Apparently, to apologize and propose a collaboration," Jackson replied, still sounding slightly dazed by the development. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "Bradley Winters wants to collaborate with you? The guy who 3 days ago was calling your project farm plumbing?" "People can surprise you when their perspectives shift," Maria commented from the stove. "Sometimes all it takes is seeing familiar things in a new context." The next morning at school, Jackson noticed an immediate difference in how students and teachers interacted with him. Where he had previously been largely ignored as the new farm kid, people now greeted him with newfound respect. Some mentioned his father's presentation, while others asked questions about his irrigation system with genuine interest. When he entered Dr. Thompson's classroom for advanced engineering, he found her rearranging the display case that had previously showcased only the most polished, professional-looking projects. She was adding a section labeled Practical Innovation, with space clearly intended for new additions. "Ah, Mr. Miller," she acknowledged as he took his seat. "I've been reconsidering our classroom displays to better represent diverse approaches to engineering excellence. I hope you'll consider allowing us to include a component of your irrigation system once the regional fair is complete." "Of course," Jackson agreed, noting how her entire demeanor toward him had transformed from dismissive to respectful in the span of a day. As other students filed in, Jackson observed subtle changes in the classroom dynamic. Bradley nodded to him with newfound respect, and several students who had previously ignored him now acknowledged his presence. Even more surprising, some of the students from less affluent backgrounds who had remained quiet in previous classes now seemed more engaged, as if the validation of Jackson's practical approach had created space for their own ideas to be valued. Dr. Thompson began the class with an announcement that confirmed the shift in her perspective. "After yesterday's illuminating presentation on field engineering, I've decided to adjust our approach to the upcoming regional fair. While presentation quality remains important for effective communication, our primary evaluation criteria will focus on innovation, functionality, and real-world applicability." She gestured toward the revised rubric displayed on the screen. "We'll be placing greater emphasis on how effectively your projects solve the problems they address, with particular attention to sustainability, resource efficiency, and maintenance considerations." The change might have seemed subtle to an outside observer, but Jackson could see its significance reflected in the reactions of his classmates. Students whose projects emphasized practical solutions sat up straighter, while those who had relied primarily on expensive components and professional appearance looked slightly uncertain. "Additionally," Dr. Thompson continued, "I'll be implementing peer review sessions where you'll evaluate each other's work without knowing which student created which project. This will help us focus on the technical merits rather than extraneous factors. After class, Dr. Thompson asked Jackson to stay behind. Once the other students had filed out, she spoke with a directness that surprised him. "Mr. Miller, I want to be clear that my reassessment of your project isn't solely due to your father's impressive demonstration, though that certainly provided valuable context." She folded her hands on her desk. "Upon careful review of your technical documentation, I recognize the genuine innovation in your approach, particularly your algorithm for interpreting the galvanic sensor data." Jackson appreciated her effort to acknowledge his work's merit, independent of his father's intervention. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Your father mentioned that you specifically chose not to reference your family connections when transferring to Ridgeview. May I ask why?" Jackson considered the question carefully. "My dad has always taught me that good engineering speaks for itself. If I relied on his name or position to get recognition, I'd never know if my work was truly valued for its own merit." Dr. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "A principled stance. If perhaps idealistic in a world that often evaluates based on credentials and connections." She paused. "However, I'm beginning to think there's wisdom in your approach. It forces others, myself included, to examine our evaluation biases." As Jackson left the classroom, he found Olivia waiting in the hallway. "How did it go?" she asked. "Good, I think," he replied. "Dr. Thompson seems genuinely interested in the technical aspects of the project now, not just dismissing it based on appearances." "Your dad's convoy made quite an impression," Olivia observed as they walked toward their next class. "Though I'm betting it's not the first time he's made a dramatic entrance to make a point." Jackson laughed. "When I was 10, a teacher told me my science project on water filtration was too messy for the classroom. Dad showed up the next day with 3 members of his battalion and set up a full field purification system on the playground to demonstrate proper scientific procedure for field testing." Olivia grinned. "I'm starting to understand where you get your determination." "From both my parents, actually," Jackson corrected. "Mom's the one who taught me that having the right tool isn't as important as understanding how to use what you have available. She grew up on the farm when things were tighter financially, had to learn to fix equipment with whatever was on hand. The days leading up to the regional science fair took on a new energy. Dr. Thompson worked with all her students to refine their presentations, but with a noticeably different emphasis than before. Instead of focusing primarily on visual polish and professional appearance, she encouraged them to clearly articulate the problems their projects addressed and the effectiveness of their solutions. For Jackson, this meant developing educational materials that explained the principles behind his irrigation system without apologizing for its humble materials. Working with Dr. Thompson, he created clear diagrams showing how the galvanic sensors functioned and graphs demonstrating the water conservation achieved compared to conventional systems. When Wednesday morning arrived, the day of the regional science fair, Jackson felt a new confidence in his project. The irrigation system hadn't changed, but the context for evaluating it had shifted dramatically. Instead of being seen as a crude assemblage of PVC and salvaged parts, it was now recognized as a deliberate design that prioritized functionality, maintainability, and accessibility. The school's science fair team gathered in the gymnasium for final preparations before boarding the buses to the regional competition center. Jackson was adjusting his display when he noticed Bradley approaching with a determined expression. "Miller," Bradley began, his tone more collegial than Jackson had ever heard from him. "I've been thinking about our conversation about collaboration. What if we started now, for this competition?" Jackson looked confused. "The projects are already submitted. It's too late to change anything." "Not change," Bradley clarified. enhance. What if we presented our projects as complementary approaches to sustainable resource management? Your irrigation system focuses on water conservation through adaptive distribution, while my solar array addresses energy efficiency. Together, they represent a more comprehensive solution than either alone. The idea had merit, and Jackson appreciated the genuine effort at collaboration rather than competition. That could work. We'd need to create some connecting material showing how the projects could integrate. I've already drafted something, Bradley admitted, producing a folder with several professionally designed information sheets. Obviously, we'd need to refine it together, but it's a start. Jackson reviewed the materials, impressed with both the technical content and Bradley's willingness to present their work as equal contributions, rather than positioning his more polished project as superior. "This is good," he acknowledged. "Really good, actually." He extended his hand. "Partners?" Bradley shook it firmly. "Partners." Dr. Thompson, observing this exchange from across the gymnasium, approached with an approving expression. "Collaborative presentation?" Bradley nodded. "We realized our projects address complementary aspects of the same larger challenge. Together, they represent a more holistic solution." "Excellent thinking," Dr. Thompson commended them. "That kind of integrated approach to complex problems is exactly what real-world engineering requires. Different specialized solutions working together rather than in isolation." As they finalized the collaborative elements of their presentation, Jackson noticed his father entering the gymnasium in his dress uniform. Sergeant Major Miller had arranged to take personal leave to attend the science fair, a gesture that meant more to Jackson than the previous day's dramatic convoy demonstration. "Dad," he greeted him with a quick embrace, "I didn't expect you until we reached the competition venue." "Thought I'd ride with the team," his father replied. "If that's all right with you." "Of course," Jackson assured him before introducing. "Bradley." "Dad, this is Bradley Winters. We're presenting our projects collaboratively today." Sergeant Major Miller shook Bradley's hand with a firm grip. "Winters, Jackson mentioned your solar collection array. Impressive efficiency metrics." Bradley, clearly somewhat intimidated by the military commander, but making an effort to maintain his composure, replied, "Thank you, sir. Though I've learned a lot from your son about practical application considerations that I'd overlooked." Best kind of engineering collaboration," Miller nodded approvingly. "Different perspectives, strengthening the overall solution." As the team prepared to board the buses, Dr. Thompson gathered them for a final word of encouragement. "Remember, today isn't just about winning ribbons or impressing judges. It's about demonstrating how your innovative thinking can address real challenges in our world. Every project here represents a unique contribution to that effort." Her gaze swept over the diverse group of students with their various projects, from Jackson's practical irrigation system to Bradley's sophisticated solar array to Olivia's water quality monitoring solution, each valuable in its own way. "I'm proud of all of you," she concluded, "not just for your technical accomplishments, but for your willingness to learn from each other and recognize the value in different approaches to problem solving." As they boarded the buses, Jackson found himself seated next to his father, with Olivia and Bradley across the aisle. Looking around at his classmates, teachers, and parent supporters, he realized that his irrigation system had accomplished something he never anticipated when designing it. It had helped bridge understanding between different approaches to innovation and challenged assumptions about what excellent engineering should look like. "Ready for the competition?" his father asked quietly. Jackson nodded, a new confidence in his expression. "For the first time, I feel like my project will be judged on what matters, how well it solves a real problem, not how polished it looks." Sergeant Major Miller smiled. "That's all any engineer can ask for. to have their work evaluated on its actual merit. As the buses pulled away from Ridgeview High School, Jackson reflected on the dramatic shifts of the past few days. What had begun as a painful dismissal of his work had transformed into a powerful lesson for the entire engineering program. That true innovation didn't always arrive in an impressive package, and that sometimes the most valuable solutions came from unexpected sources. The regional science fair venue loomed ahead, and with it, the opportunity to present his irrigation system not as a farm boy's makeshift project, but as a genuine engineering innovation with real-world impact. Exactly as it had always been once one looked beyond appearances to see its true value. The regional science fair buzzed with activity as hundreds of students from across the state assembled their displays in the convention center's expansive exhibition hall. Schools had been assigned specific areas, with Ridgeview High's section prominently positioned near the center of the hall, a testament to the school's strong reputation in previous competitions. Jackson and Bradley worked seamlessly to arrange their connected displays, positioning Jackson's irrigation system and Bradley's solar array as complementary components of a comprehensive resource management solution. The contrast between Bradley's sleek, professionally manufactured components and Jackson's repurposed materials was striking. Yet they had managed to create a unified presentation that highlighted how both approaches addressed different aspects of the same fundamental challenges. "I still can't believe we're doing this," Bradley commented as they made final adjustments to their joint information panels. 2 weeks ago, I would have been mortified to have my project associated with PVC pipes and salvaged electronics. Jackson smiled, recognizing the genuine change in Bradley's perspective. "And I would have assumed you were setting me up for some kind of humiliation." "Perceptions change," Bradley acknowledged. "After seeing your system in operation on your farm, I realized I'd been designing for appearance rather than function. My array looks impressive, but your irrigation system actually solves a real problem that affects people's lives." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Thompson, who approached with clipboard in hand, reviewing all the Ridgeview projects before judging began. Her expression was one of approval as she examined their collaborative presentation. "Excellent integration," she noted. "You've created a compelling narrative about how different engineering approaches can complement each other. This kind of systems thinking is exactly what judges look for at the state and national levels." Jackson noticed how Dr. Thompson's entire demeanor had transformed since his father's presentation at the school. Where she had once been dismissive of his rustic project, she now engaged with both him and Bradley as equals, focusing on the technical merits of their work rather than its appearance. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson," Bradley replied. "We've tried to emphasize how sustainable resource management requires both high-efficiency energy collection and precision water distribution. Neither system alone provides a complete solution." "A sophisticated insight," she acknowledged, "and an excellent example of how collaboration often produces more comprehensive approaches than competition." As Dr. Thompson moved on to review other Ridgeview projects, Jackson caught sight of his father in the growing crowd of attendees. Sergeant Major Miller had changed from his formal dress uniform into more subdued civilian clothes, though his military bearing remained unmistakable. He was speaking with Principal Chen, their conversation appearing serious yet cordial. "Your dad decided to tone it down for today?" Bradley observed, following Jackson's gaze. Jackson nodded. "He made his point yesterday. Today, he's just here as a parent, not trying to intimidate anyone with his rank or position." "Still intimidating," Bradley admitted, "but in a good way. He clearly cares about ensuring your work gets fair recognition." The morning proceeded with final preparations as judges began their initial walks through the exhibition hall. getting oriented before formal evaluations would begin after lunch. Jackson noticed several judges pausing to examine their display with interest, particularly the connection between the two seemingly disparate projects. During the lunch break, Jackson found a quiet spot in the convention center's atrium to eat the sandwich his mother had packed. He was joined by Olivia, whose water quality monitoring system had been positioned near the other environmental projects. "Your collaboration with Bradley is getting a lot of attention," she informed him. "I've overheard at least 3 judges discussing it specifically." "Really?" Jackson asked, surprised. "What are they saying?" "That it's unusual to see such different approaches presented as complementary rather than competitive," Olivia explained. One judge called it refreshingly holistic thinking from high school students who typically focus on isolated solutions. Jackson felt a mixture of pride and relief. The attention was focusing on the engineering principles and real-world applications, not on his family connections or his father's dramatic intervention. "How's your project being received?" he asked. Olivia smiled. "Better than I expected. After seeing how your moisture sensors work, I adapted some similar principles for detecting contaminants." One of the university judges spent 15 minutes asking me technical questions about the detection algorithm. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jackson's mother, who had taken the day off from her responsibilities at the farm to attend the fair. "There you are," Maria Miller said warmly, joining them at the table. "Your father's been talking to everyone who'll listen about sustainable agricultural technologies. I had to practically drag him away from a conversation with the Palmer Tech representatives before he recruited them for some new military engineering initiative." Jackson laughed, picturing his father's enthusiasm. "At least he's not in uniform today." "Small mercies," his mother agreed with an affectionate smile, "though I suspect everyone here knows exactly who he is by now." She turned to Olivia. "And how is your project being received, dear?" As Olivia described the positive feedback from judges, Jackson noticed Bradley approaching their table, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Miller," he said, an urgent edge to his voice, "the Palmer Tech judges are starting their rounds in our section in 15 minutes. I just thought—" "You should know." Jackson nodded his thanks, understanding the significance. Palmer Tech was known for offering internships to exceptional participants, making their evaluation particularly important for students interested in engineering careers. When they returned to their display, they found Sergeant Major Miller engaged in conversation with a gray-haired woman whose badge identified her as Dr. Helen Watkins, lead engineer for Palmer Tech's agricultural division. Jackson felt a momentary panic. Was his father using his position to influence the judges? As they approached, however, he realized they were discussing a technical aspect of irrigation efficiency in arid regions, with no mention of Jackson or his project. His father was simply sharing professional knowledge as one engineer to another. Seeing Jackson and Bradley arrive, Sergeant Major Miller smoothly concluded his conversation. "Dr. Watkins, I believe these are the students responsible for this integrated resource management approach." He stepped back, allowing them to take center stage without further intervention. "Gentlemen," Dr. Watkins greeted them with professional interest, "I've been admiring your presentation. Would you walk me through the functional integration points between these two systems?" For the next 20 minutes, Jackson and Bradley took turns explaining their projects, emphasizing how they had designed their systems to address different aspects of resource management while maintaining compatibility for potential integration. Jackson detailed the adaptive moisture sensing that allowed precise water distribution, while Bradley explained how his solar array could power the pumps and control systems with minimal external energy requirements. Dr. Watkins asked probing questions about specific technical choices, pressing them on the reasoning behind their design decisions. When she inquired about the use of galvanic reaction sensors rather than commercial moisture probes, Jackson explained the maintenance and accessibility considerations that had guided his choice. The sensors need to be repairable using locally available materials, he elaborated. Commercial probes require replacement when they fail, which isn't practical in remote locations or for small-scale farmers with limited resources. Dr. Watkins nodded thoughtfully. A constraint-driven innovation approach. You design not just for functionality, but for sustainability throughout the life cycle of the system. She made several notes on her tablet before moving to Bradley's portion of the display. "And the solar collection geometry?" she asked, indicating the unusual arrangement of Bradley's panels. "It's optimized for variable light conditions rather than peak efficiency under ideal circumstances," Bradley explained. "The traditional array configuration I originally designed performed better in laboratory testing, but this arrangement maintains higher consistency across different weather conditions and seasons." "Influenced by your partner's practicality?" Dr. Watkins asked with a perceptive smile. Bradley glanced at Jackson. "Yes, actually. After seeing how his irrigation system prioritized reliable function in real-world conditions over impressive specifications in ideal circumstances, I reconsidered my approach." After completing her evaluation, Dr. Watkins thanked them both and moved on to the next display. Jackson released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That went well," Bradley observed. "She spent more time with us than with any other project I've seen her evaluate." Throughout the afternoon, a steady stream of judges visited their display, each focusing on different aspects of their projects. Some were particularly interested in the moisture sensors, others in the solar collection efficiency, but most commented positively on the integrated approach they had developed. By late afternoon, as the evaluation period concluded and judges retired to deliberate, Jackson felt a quiet confidence regardless of the results. His project had been evaluated fairly on its technical merits, rather than dismissed for its humble appearance. Whether or not they received awards, that recognition alone represented a significant victory. The awards ceremony began at 5 o'clock, with hundreds of participants and supporters gathering in the convention center's main auditorium. The Ridgeview team sat together near the front, with parents and faculty behind them. Jackson found himself seated between Bradley and Olivia, with his parents and Dr. Thompson directly behind. As the ceremony progressed through various categories and special recognitions, tension built among the Ridgeview students. When the sustainability category was announced, Jackson felt his father's reassuring hand briefly touch his shoulder from the row behind. In the sustainability category, third place goes to Westlake Academy for their biodegradable plastics alternative, the announcer proclaimed. Jackson applauded politely, trying to manage his expectations. Second place in sustainability goes to Olivia Martinez from Ridgeview High School for her adaptable water quality monitoring system. Olivia gasped in surprise, and Jackson joined the enthusiastic applause as she made her way to the stage to receive her award. It was the first time a Ridgeview student from outside the wealthy demographic had placed in a major category, and Jackson felt a surge of pride for his friend. And first place in the sustainability category, with a project that demonstrates exceptional innovation in resource conservation through integrated systems thinking. Jackson held his breath. Goes to Jackson Miller and Bradley Winters from Ridgeview High School for their integrated sustainable resource management system. The Ridgeview section erupted in applause as Jackson and Bradley exchanged shocked glances before making their way to the stage. Dr. Thompson was on her feet, her expression one of genuine pride as she applauded their achievement. As they accepted their award, the presenter added, The judges were particularly impressed by how this project combined high-efficiency technology with practical, accessible implementation to create a comprehensive approach to resource management that could be deployed in various contexts around the world. Standing on that stage, with Bradley beside him and their schoolmates cheering below, Jackson felt the culmination of a journey that had begun with humiliation but transformed into something much more valuable, recognition based purely on the merit of their work. The remainder of the ceremony brought additional successes for Ridgeview, with various students receiving recognition across multiple categories. When the overall competition awards were announced, Jackson was surprised to hear their names called again. The Palmer Tech Innovation Award, which includes summer internships in the company's research division, goes to Jackson Miller and Bradley Winters for their exceptional demonstration of collaborative problem-solving and integrated systems thinking. As they returned to the stage, Dr. Watkins herself presented the award, adding, "Palmer Tech is specifically interested in engineering approaches that combine cutting-edge technology with practical implementation considerations. This project exemplifies how different perspectives can strengthen overall solutions when engineers collaborate rather than compete." The celebration afterward was jubilant, with Ridgeview students and parents gathering in the convention center lobby to congratulate the various award recipients. Dr. Thompson moved among them, her usual reserve softened by genuine pride in her students' achievements. When she reached Jackson, she spoke with a sincerity he had never heard from her before. "Mr. Miller, your project and your partnership with Mr. Winters has taught me a valuable lesson about recognizing innovation regardless of its packaging. I'm grateful for that perspective adjustment, however dramatically it was delivered." She glanced meaningfully toward Sergeant Major Miller, who was engaged in conversation with Principal Chen nearby. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson," Jackson replied. "I appreciate your willingness to reconsider your initial assessment. Not everyone would have been so open to changing their perspective." "Science demands intellectual honesty," she stated simply. "When new evidence contradicts previous conclusions, those conclusions must be revised." She paused. "Though I must admit, your father's evidence was presented rather convincingly." They shared a smile at the understatement, the previous tension between them dissolved by mutual respect. As the celebration continued, Dr. Watkins from Palmer Tech approached Jackson and Bradley with business cards in hand. "Gentlemen, I'm looking forward to having you both at Palmer Tech this summer. Our agricultural division is particularly interested in your integrated approach to resource management." "Thank you, Dr. Watkins," Jackson replied, accepting the card. "It's an honor to have the opportunity." "Though I am curious," she continued, glancing between them, "your proposal was submitted as a collaborative project, but my understanding is that you originally developed these systems independently. What prompted the integration?" Bradley answered without hesitation. "Perspective, Dr. Watkins. Jackson's practical approach helped me recognize that my focus on technical specifications was missing the larger context of real-world implementation, and my resources allowed his system to incorporate elements that might otherwise have been beyond reach." "Complementary strengths," Dr. Watkins nodded approvingly. "The best engineering teams bring together diverse perspectives." She looked specifically at Jackson. "I understand your irrigation system concept has already seen international deployment through military agricultural assistance programs?" Jackson nodded, no longer uncomfortable acknowledging the connection. "Modified versions have been implemented in several drought-affected regions. The design prioritizes maintainability with locally available materials over technical sophistication. The function over form," Dr. Watkins confirmed, "a principle many engineers rediscover after years of professional experience. You seem to have grasped it intuitively." She glanced at Sergeant Major Miller, who was now approaching their group, "though perhaps you had some guidance in that direction." Dr. Watkins, Sergeant Major Miller acknowledged with a respectful nod. Congratulations on recognizing genuine innovation. Too many specialists focus solely on technical specifications without considering the human factors that determine whether a solution will actually work in the field. A perspective our industry is increasingly embracing, she replied. In fact, Palmer Tech has recently established a division focused specifically on developing technologies for resource-limited environments, where maintainability and accessibility are as critical as technical performance. Their conversation continued, drifting into technical aspects of field implementation that Jackson found fascinating. He noticed Dr. Thompson joining the discussion, her expertise in materials science contributing valuable insights to the practical considerations being discussed. It was striking to see how completely the dynamics had shifted from just days earlier. Where Dr. Thompson had once dismissed his project as too rustic for serious consideration, she now engaged as a colleague in discussions about its practical applications. Where Bradley had once mocked the homemade appearance of his system, he now championed their integrated approach with genuine enthusiasm. As the evening concluded and people began gathering their materials to depart, Jackson found himself helping Olivia disassemble her water quality monitoring display. "So," she said quietly, "everything worked out better than you could have imagined, huh? Awards, internship, and completely changed dynamics at school." Jackson considered this. "It's not what I expected when my dad showed up with a military convoy, that's for sure. I was just hoping for fair evaluation, not all of this." "Sometimes it takes a dramatic intervention to shift entrenched perspectives," Olivia observed. "Your dad knew exactly what he was doing, creating a context where Dr. Thompson and others couldn't ignore the practical value of your approach." "I guess so," Jackson acknowledged, "though I still wish my work could have been recognized on its own merits without the military connection." "It was," Olivia insisted. "The judges today didn't award you first place because your dad is a sergeant major. They recognized the genuine innovation in your design and its practical applications. The convoy just forced certain people to look past their initial judgments and actually see what was there all along." Her perspective helped settle something in Jackson's mind. The awards and recognition weren't because of his father's intervention. They were possible because that intervention had created space for fair evaluation that might otherwise have been blocked by preconceptions about what serious engineering should look like. As they walked toward the exit where parents were waiting, Olivia added, "Besides, your collaboration with Bradley has created ripple effects throughout the engineering program. Did you notice how Dr. Thompson interacted with all of us today? Not just the wealthy kids with expensive projects, but everyone with viable ideas, regardless of how polished their presentations were." It was true. Throughout the day, Jackson had observed Dr. Thompson engaging more equitably with all her students, focusing on the substance of their work rather than superficial aspects of presentation. The shift, though subtle, represented a significant change in the classroom culture that would benefit many students beyond himself. Outside, Jackson found his parents waiting beside their modest sedan, now parked near Bradley's expensive sports car, a visual juxtaposition that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "Proud of you, son," Sergeant Major Miller said, simply embracing Jackson with genuine emotion. Not just for the awards, but for standing behind your work even when others couldn't see its value. "Thanks, Dad," Jackson replied, "though your convoy definitely helped clarify things for certain people." His father smiled unapologetically. "Strategic deployment of resources to achieve a specific objective. Standard military procedure." Maria Miller shook her head with fond exasperation. "What your father means is that sometimes people need help seeing past their preconceptions. The convoy may have been dramatic, but it served its purpose. Bradley approached their group, looking somewhat hesitant to interrupt the family moment. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I wanted to thank you for your hospitality yesterday, showing me the irrigation system on your farm. It completely changed my understanding of practical engineering considerations." "You're welcome any time, Bradley," Maria responded warmly. "Perhaps you can visit again to help Jackson integrate the solar components you've been discussing." "I'd like that," Bradley agreed, his previous social reservations about associating with the farm kid entirely dissolved. "We have a lot of work to do before the internship if we want to develop a fully integrated prototype." As they prepared to depart, Dr. Thompson approached for a final word. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I want to express my appreciation for your son's contributions to our engineering program. His perspective has been enlightening for all of us, myself included." "We're proud of him," Maria replied simply. "As you should be," Dr. Thompson affirmed. "And Sergeant Major Miller, while your method of highlighting the practical applications of Jackson's system was unorthodox, I must acknowledge its effectiveness in challenging certain institutional biases in how we evaluate student work." Sergeant Major Miller's expression remained neutral, though his eyes conveyed amused satisfaction. "Sometimes a demonstration is more effective than a discussion, Dr. Thompson. In the field, we focus on results rather than methodology." "Indeed," she replied dryly. "A principle I'll be incorporating into our evaluation approaches moving forward, though perhaps with less dramatic implementations." The drive home was filled with animated conversation about the day's events, the awards, and the unexpected opportunities that had emerged from what had begun as a painful dismissal of Jackson's work. "Are you excited about the Palmer Tech internship?" Maria asked as they turned onto the familiar country road leading to their farm. "Definitely," Jackson confirmed. Dr. Watkins mentioned they're specifically interested in developing technologies for resource-limited environments. "That's exactly the kind of engineering I've always wanted to do, creating solutions that help people who need them most, not just those who can afford the latest technology." "That's my boy," his father said with quiet pride, understanding that engineering isn't about impressing people with sophistication. It's about solving real problems effectively with whatever resources are available. As their farm came into view, illuminated by the setting sun, Jackson felt a profound sense of satisfaction. His irrigation system, developed from practical necessity and built with repurposed materials from their farm, had been recognized not despite its humble appearance, but because of the innovative thinking it represented. More importantly, the experience had catalyzed changes that would benefit many students beyond himself, creating space for different kinds of innovation to be valued, regardless of packaging or presentation. 3 months later, on a warm summer morning, Jackson stood in the south field of the Miller farm, explaining the integrated irrigation and solar system to an unlikely audience. Dr. Thompson had brought the entire summer engineering program from Ridgeview to observe the practical implementation of the award-winning project, now fully deployed across 5 acres of drought-resistant crops. "The solar collectors power both the pumps and the control systems," Jackson explained to the gathered students, pointing to the array that Bradley had helped install during weekend work sessions throughout the spring. "We've positioned them to optimize collection during peak water demand periods, ensuring the system has maximum power precisely when it needs it most." The students, a diverse group that included both affluent kids from the newer suburban developments and those from the original farming families, listened with genuine interest. Dr. Thompson stood slightly apart, allowing Jackson to lead the technical demonstration without interference. "The moisture sensors are embedded throughout the field at varying depths," he continued, indicating the monitoring stations positioned strategically among the crops. They provide real-time data to the control unit, which adjusts water distribution based on actual soil conditions rather than predetermined schedules. A girl from one of the farming families raised her hand. Could this system be scaled down for smaller applications? My family's greenhouse is struggling with water efficiency. Absolutely, Jackson confirmed. That's one of the design priorities, scalability to different applications. The core components can be adapted to various sizes of operation without losing functionality. Dr. Thompson joined the conversation. This emphasis on adaptability is a key engineering principle that applies across disciplines. Designing solutions that can be implemented at different scales and in different contexts significantly expands their impact. As the students dispersed to examine different aspects of the system up close, Dr. Thompson remained with Jackson, surveying the flourishing crops that were thriving despite using nearly 60% less water than conventional irrigation methods. You've created something remarkable here, Mr. Miller, she acknowledged. Not just the technical system, but a shift in how we think about engineering education at Ridgeview. How so? Jackson asked, genuinely curious. Since your project and the regional fair, we've implemented blind evaluation protocols for all engineering competitions, she explained. Projects are assessed purely on functionality, innovation, and impact, without knowledge of which student created them or what resources they had available. That's a significant change, Jackson observed. And a necessary one, Dr. Thompson admitted. The results have been revealing. Students we might previously have overlooked are demonstrating remarkable innovation when their work is evaluated on merit alone, without the unconscious biases that presentation quality can trigger. The summer sun illuminated the fields around them, where Jackson's irrigation system was quietly, efficiently delivering precisely the water needed to each section of crops. The system wasn't flashy or impressive to casual observation. Most of its components were hidden in the soil or housed in weatherproof containers, but its effectiveness was undeniable in the thriving plants and conserved resources. In many ways, it embodied the lesson that had transformed not just Jackson's experience at Ridgeview, but the entire engineering program. That true innovation wasn't always found in the most polished package, and that sometimes the most valuable solutions came from those who understood practical constraints as opportunities for creative problem-solving rather than limitations to be overcome with expensive materials. As the field trip concluded and students began boarding the bus back to Ridgeview, Bradley, who had returned from a family vacation just in time to join the excursion, approached Jackson with tablet in hand. I've been refining the integration software for our Palmer Tech project, he said, displaying complex schematics on the screen. If we adjust the sensor sensitivity based on crop type, we could further reduce water usage in specific zones. Their collaboration, which had begun as an unlikely partnership between the wealthy suburban student and the practical farm boy, had developed into a genuinely productive engineering relationship that leveraged both Bradley's technical resources and Jackson's practical innovation. Dr. Thompson observed their interaction with satisfaction as she prepared to lead her students back to school. The transformation in both young men, Bradley's new appreciation for practical implementation and Jackson's increased confidence in his innovative approach, represented exactly the kind of growth she hoped to cultivate in all her students. 5 years later, a new irrigation system bearing the Palmer Miller name began appearing on small farms across drought-affected regions of the country. Affordable, maintainable with basic tools, and remarkably efficient, it combined sophisticated solar technology with practical, accessible design elements that made it viable for farmers with limited resources. The system had grown from a high school science fair project into the flagship product of a new division within Palmer Tech, focused specifically on agricultural innovations for resource-constrained environments. Jackson Miller, now completing his engineering degree while working part-time at Palmer Tech, led the field implementation team, while Bradley Winters headed the technical development division. At the official launch of the commercial system, held appropriately at Ridgeview High School, Dr. Eleanor Thompson, now the district's STEM program director, addressed the gathered industry representatives, educators, and former students. The Palmer-Miller irrigation system represents more than just technological innovation, she told the audience. It embodies an approach to engineering that values practical impact alongside technical sophistication, an approach that was catalyzed right here at Ridgeview when two students with very different perspectives found common ground in addressing a shared challenge. In the front row, Sergeant Major Robert Miller, retired, sat beside his wife Maria, watching with pride as their son demonstrated the commercial version of the system that had begun as a collection of PVC pipes and salvaged electronics in their south field. "Your convoy made quite an impression," Maria whispered to her husband. "I think half the speakers today have referenced the military demonstration that transformed Ridgeview's engineering program." Robert smiled, unrepentant. Strategic deployment of resources to achieve maximum impact. Basic military strategy. On stage, Jackson was explaining how the system's design prioritized maintainability and accessibility without sacrificing performance. Principles he had learned working alongside his father on their family farm and had now incorporated into commercial engineering. The most important measure of engineering excellence isn't how sophisticated a solution appears, he told the audience, echoing lessons learned years earlier. It's how effectively it solves real problems for real people, especially those with limited resources or technical support. As applause filled the auditorium, Dr. Thompson leaned toward the Millers. "Your son's perspective has transformed not just our engineering program, but how dozens of schools now approach STEM education. That humble irrigation system has created ripples far beyond what any of us could have anticipated." "Sometimes," Sergeant Major Miller replied philosophically, "the most important innovations don't look innovative at first glance. They simply solve problems more effectively than existing approaches without drawing attention to themselves." Dr. Thompson nodded thoughtfully, remembering her initial dismissal of Jackson's rustic project and the dramatic intervention that had forced her to reconsider her evaluation standards. "A lesson I'm grateful to have learned, however theatrical the teaching method." The launch event concluded with a demonstration of the Palmer-Miller system on Ridgeview's agricultural education plot. Once a neglected corner of the campus, now a thriving teaching garden where students from all backgrounds learned practical applications of the scientific principles they studied in classrooms. As attendees gathered around the demonstration, Bradley Winters approached his former teacher. "Dr. Thompson, I've been meaning to thank you." "For what specifically?" she asked, genuinely curious. "For changing your approach after Jackson's project. If you hadn't been willing to reconsider your evaluation standards, neither of us would have had the opportunity to develop our ideas into what they've become. It took courage to admit that previous methods might have been missing important innovations." Dr. Thompson considered this. "Science demands intellectual honesty. When evidence contradicts our existing framework, the framework must be adjusted, not the evidence dismissed." Together, they watched as Jackson fielded questions about the system's practical applications, his confidence and expertise evident as he explained complex technical concepts in accessible terms, a skill he had developed through years of translating. Between the theoretical world of engineering research and the practical realities of field implementation. "Who would have thought," Bradley mused, "that a collection of PVC pipes and salvaged electronics would launch multiple careers and transform an educational approach?" "The most valuable lesson I've learned in 20 years of teaching," Dr. Thompson replied, is that innovation rarely arrives in the package we expect. Our job isn't to filter based on appearance, but to recognize potential wherever it exists, especially when it arrives in unexpected forms. As the event transitioned to a reception celebrating the official launch, Jackson found a moment to step away and walk the perimeter of the demonstration garden. The irrigation system, humming quietly in the background, represented not just a commercial, a product, but a philosophy of engineering that valued practical impact alongside technical sophistication. He was joined by his father, who surveyed the gathering with quiet satisfaction. "Not bad for a farm boy's rustic project," Sergeant Major Miller observed with a hint of pride. "Not bad for a dramatic military intervention either," Jackson replied, with a smile, "though I still maintain you could have made your point without an entire convoy." "Go big or go home, son," his father replied unapologetically. "Some perspectives are too entrenched to shift with subtle approaches." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as educators, engineers, and agriculture representatives examined the system that had grown from their family farm to international implementation. What had begun as a teacher's dismissal of a student's rustic project had catalyzed changes that extended far beyond a single classroom or science fair, creating space for different kinds of innovation to be recognized and valued, regardless of packaging or presentation. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Sergeant Major Miller said finally. "The system's international deployment," Jackson guessed. His father shook his head. "That you stood by your work even when others couldn't see its value. You believed in your innovation not because it looked impressive, but because you knew it solved a real problem effectively." Jackson nodded, understanding. The most important lesson hadn't been about irrigation systems or engineering principles, but about having the confidence to stand behind genuine innovation, even when it didn't match others' expectations of what excellence should look like. As they rejoined the celebration, Dr. Thompson was addressing the gathered representatives about Ridgeview's transformed approach to STEM education. An approach now being implemented in schools across the country, creating opportunities for students from all backgrounds to have their innovations recognized based on merit rather than appearance. "The most valuable solutions," she was saying, "often come from those who understand constraints as opportunities rather than limitations, who see possibilities where others see only problems. Our job as educators is to recognize that potential, regardless of how it's packaged." Her gaze met Jackson's across the room, and they shared a moment of understanding. Teacher and student, both transformed by a journey that had begun with dismissal but evolved into mutual respect and recognition of what truly mattered in both engineering and education. Function over form, impact over appearance, potential over packaging, principles as applicable to evaluating people as they were to evaluating projects, and a legacy that would continue to influence generations of students long after the specific details of a military convoy arriving at a high school had faded into school legend. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.